Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 7 of season 2 of Riverdale, Tales from the Darkside. And this is a nod to a film and TV series from the 1980s. I've actually seen some of Tales from the Darkside, and it's kind of an anthology series. Some of the stories were quite good and surprisingly dark. I mean, this was a show that was not afraid to let evil win in the end. And then there were a few stories that I thought were really dumb. I mean, there's one story that I remember from the movies called "A New Lease on Life" that was, to put it bluntly, exceptionally stupid. But nonetheless, if you like '80s horror, those are definitely some hidden gems that are often overlooked. Anyway, kind of getting right into this episode, we've kind of got some nice plot lines swirling around all of our main characters, and Josie gets her first genuinely really significant plot line here. So let's just kind of get right into it. Of course, the main thing in my mind was what's going on with Jughead this episode, and his little situation with Penny Peabody, and yeah, boy, I really have to give the writers credit. You know, I have over the course of 2 episodes, I've really come to just absolutely hate Penny Peabody with like the same sort of passion I feel for like Damien Dark and Reverse Flash on like Flash and Legends of Tomorrow and those shows. It's just like I'm just watching them like, oh my god, you are such an utter bastard. I hate you. And what's interesting is that she points out that she's doing all of this not because she has anything against Jughead, it's because she's pissed at his dad, which makes a lot more sense as to why FP flipped out when Jughead mentioned he owed Penny a favor. So it's not really, I think, that Penny is this, massively powerful person, although clearly she's no one to be toyed with. But it's more like he knows that, oh man, this is personal. All right, this isn't business. This is personal. And she's going to be doing everything she can to make this as miserable for me as possible. And Penny is smart enough to know that the best way to make FP miserable is to hurt Jughead. But the thing that kind of gets me is that basically she's trying to blackmail him with this video of him and Archie carrying a box into a warehouse. That's it. Now let's stop and think about this. It shows them carrying a box into the warehouse. If Sheriff Killer is going to charge Jughead with anything, he's going to need some sort of contents in the box of it being, illegal. I mean, granted, Jughead thinks unquestionably that what's in that box is drugs, but unless there's some actual proof that what was in that box was drugs, then what exactly can Sheriff Keller charge him with? And if Sheriff Keller arrests Jughead, the obvious question he's going to ask is, who gave you the box? Well, the answer is Penny Peabody. So at that point, Jughead has been arrested and is looking at some sort of charges. What reason does Jughead have to not sick Sheriff Keller on Penny Peabody? And it's not as if her being a member of the Southside Serpents is a secret. When she leaves Jughead's trailer, she is wearing a Southside Serpents jacket. So safe to say Penny Peabody is probably on the sheriff's radar, as, never mind all the times that she's defended the Serpents in court. So yeah, no doubt Sheriff Keller knows that Penny is a real slimeball and would be happy to throw her in jail if he could. That said, Penny is obviously no fool and could probably create some sort of evidence that would show Jughead delivering something illegal. But again, why would Jughead not simply say, Penny Peabody gave me this box and didn't tell me what was in it? I mean, how has Penny not implicated herself? She would have to find some other way to kind of get Jughead to keep his mouth shut about it. Now, maybe she could imply that she has connections in jail and could maybe have some guys jump his dad. I mean, that certainly seems possible to me. But still, this does not seem like the most well thought out plan. Oh, or of course, she could also, point out like, hey, Archie's on this video too. Do you want to do something that'll ruin his life? But again, if Sheriff Keller has that video, he's going to know that Archie was a part of this, and Archie can testify on backup Jughead. On the other hand, Archie is also Jughead's longtime best friend, and yeah, he does have a bit of credibility issue here. But, nonetheless, this again does not seem like a most well thought out plan. I mean, I'm sure Penny imagines herself as this sort of very Machiavellian person. And the interesting thing about Machiavelli is, one, if you actually read the real history of his life and his things, I personally read him as a very misunderstood person. I mean, he spent most of his life basically fighting for the preservation of the Florentine Republic, if I remember correctly. Now, keep in mind, those republics were basically the closest thing to anything that was a real democracy for God only knows how long in the divine age, the divine rule of kings era in Europe. So yeah, basically Machiavelli was a big supporter of democracy. And his most famous book, The Prince, is by some people thought to be in fact intended as a satire, not some sort of evil overlord's how-to manual. And while he does have that line about how it's better to be feared than loved, what a lot of people tend to forget about is that he continues on to say, it is better that while being feared is all well and good and at times necessary, one should take care not to be hated. Because if you're hated, then people will take risks to bring you down. And you can't really tell me that you don't think there are a lot of people in Riverdale that hate Penny Peabody. So if Jughead is smart and can track down some other people that hate Penny Peabody, well. And hey, he's got somebody on his side, aka Betty, who's pretty good at tracking down information on people. And you have to imagine that if Jughead is somehow able to rid the serpents of Penny Peabody, and you really think he's the only serpent that Penny has her hooks in, well, that would probably do a lot to elevate Jughead's standing in the group, now wouldn't it? Especially if he's able to clean house of some people like Tallboy in the process. Remember, Tallboy is the one that told him, go talk to Penny Peabody. So it's probably not too much of a stretch to think that he's probably in Penny's pocket as well. Let's see. Oh, and I love that whole thing with the box. Hang on, I've got it called up here on my computer from TV Tropes, exactly what it said. Do not open Miskatonic University via H.P. Lovecraft, Polar Expedition, January 13th, 1923. Okay, so if you even have some basic Lovecraft under your belt, you know this is a gigantic reference to In the Mountains of Madness and just sort of the Cthulhu mythos in general. And this episode, the bit with Archie and Jughead, does a lot to sort of set Greendale up as this really creepy supernatural place. I mean, we've got this creepy-ass box. Penny even warns Jughead, like, man, you don't want to be in Greendale around midnight. There's that whole situation with the bloody deer. And if I remember correctly, it's Greendale that's supposed to be where Sabrina, the teenage witch, is from. And they've said they're working on a spin-off of Riverdale called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So I think this is them starting to sow some seeds for that that Sabrina TV show, which I assume will probably turn up on TV next fall. And it's not as if Riverdale hasn't kind of danced around the idea that maybe there's a supernatural edge to this town already, which, I mean, it's cool. I really, really love this whole atmosphere that they have going on in the show. It's wonderful. Not really sure what to make of the whole Riverdale Reaper thing, although you would think that something like this is something that people in the town would still be talking about even decades later. I mean, I've heard stories in small towns of stuff that happened like back in the 1920s and 30s of, some guy found out some dude was sleeping with his wife, and one night he hid behind a tree and blew the dude's head off right behind while he walked past. And again, this is a story about something that happened in like the 1930s or the 1940s. And I'm not exaggerating here. That's not only was that a story that was told to me, I actually sort of vaguely knew the guy in passing who did it. Long story short, people took the other guy had it coming thing, and pretty much anybody with any real authority looked the other way, and the guy in question basically became a hermit. But I saw him around. Like, he was somebody that knew my people in my family. I mean, I'm not. That's no tale from the dark side. That's a real story. And there's a little bit more to the story, but that would involve me mentioning what the guy's name is, and that's no. There's no point in that. He's long dead. So, but I knew him. I knew that guy when I was a kid. Anyway, getting back on track, I think we've said everything there's to say about Archie. The whole Betty and Veronica thing, this I was a little less enthused about, particularly the whole thing where Betty thinks, you know what, I'm going to break into the sheriff's house. But, you know, it was kind of nice to see Betty and Veronica having their own little thing going on, and what's basically sounded like Kevin trying to explain some game that sounded like a mix of Risk and Dungeons and Dragons to Veronica was hilarious. And I say that as somebody who likes Dungeons and Dragons quite a bit, but never really quite got into Risk. But nonetheless, and it's kind of hilarious that it does turn out in the end that Veronica was right and the sheriff and the mayor are getting it on, which puts some of that them showing up at the high school at the same time together in a rather interesting light. But Betty does have a great point. It's like, okay, how in the world did the Black Hood get into the police station to kill this guy? I mean, the idea that the Black Hood is somebody of respect in the community, that makes sense. And also remember, the Black Hood told her, if you saw me without my mask, you would recognize me. I'm someone you know. And, you know, it just makes sense that this is someone who's an older man. So again, who fits that profile? Who could walk into the police station as much as they wanted, is an older man. It's an interesting suspect list nonetheless. Let's see. So yeah, I don't really have too much to say about that. The thing with the sheriff and the mayor having a thing going on, well, that's potentially interesting. But so let's see. So now we've got our storyline with Josie, which I thought was quite interesting. One thing, part of that is like the whole thing with Chuck. Now, a lot of people were kind of unhappy in season 1 where Chuck was portrayed as this real slut-shaming, you know, woman-using bastard, when the Chuck in the comics is genuinely a very, very nice person. On the other hand, good storytelling involves character growth. So if you want to get a character to somewhere, you have to start them somewhere else, and you know, have them getting to that place be part of that story. Like the show Arrow is a great example. You know, when you start with that episode show on like season 1, you know, you've got Oliver Queen killing guys left and right, and you know, that's not really what Green Arrow is about. And it takes him the better part of 4 seasons before he really properly adopts the name of Green Arrow, and he has changed very much as a person. So, you know, you really did have to start him somewhere very different than where he was going to ultimately end up. And having Chuck go from being somebody who was a real bastard to someone who's genuinely a good and decent person, well, that's a potentially very interesting storyline. Now, of course, Josie and basically everybody else in the school are not buying Chuck's I've changed act, and with good reason. You don't do stuff like that to people and just change overnight and expect everybody to embrace you. That said, we do come to find out that, you know, Chuck's not lying about attending church at the very least. He's at least acting sincere. And all the stuff he ends up being accused of ultimately turns out to be false. We have the person who's basically been playing secret admirer and being creepy about it, his Cheryl, of all people, which I did not see coming. I think they made sure to sort of have that janitor guy, Mr. Svensson, who I'm pretty sure is a character from the comics, sort of hanging around a lot in the background for us to sort of think, well, okay, maybe it's him, which is, an easy and obvious answer. And then they throw a twist at us. It's like, oh, that twist that you thought we were saving for? Now we got something completely different. But it's not that unexpected. Well, it's not 100% unexpected if you pay attention. I mean, look, if you watch the way that Cheryl is talking to Josie, the moments when she chooses to touch her and stuff, it's all very manipulative, especially when it comes to doing stuff that's gonna that will potentially and ultimately does drive a wedge between Josie and the other pussycats. I mean, those Val and Melody are her two closest friends, and now they want nothing to do with Josie, which leaves Cheryl as basically Josie's only real friend and the person potentially holding the keys to the kingdom of her having a solo career. Again, this seems creepily like what was kind of seemed to be going on with Archie a little bit last season. So you kind of have to wonder what's going on with Cheryl here. I mean, what's happening here? And the whole thing of Cheryl seems to like girls now. Well, okay, that's not something I was expecting. But yeah, Cheryl's a pretty messed up girl, one way or the other. And oh my God, that scene where it looked like the Black Hood killed Josie, I was in utter shock. I thought oh my God, I can't believe the show is doing this. I mean, it turns out to be a dream at the end of the day. Oh, and I gotta say, before I forget, Cheryl calling Archie and Jughead Bert and Ernie, that was hilarious. I love that. But yeah, that whole thing with it turning out to be a dream, I was like, oh my God, I about had a heart attack there. It's like, man, you can't kill Josie. Oh my God. But yeah, let's see. Anything else we need to talk about in this episode? No, nothing jumps to mind. All in all, man, this was a really, really good episode. I really like that sort of idiosyncratic storytelling, the interlocking stories. As people have pointed out, it seems very Quentin Tarantino. The sort of narration documentary stuff at the opening is apparently a nod to the old Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I've never seen those. But yeah, this is just a really well put together episode, and I enjoyed it. So everybody, I'm going to leave it here. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, please take care and have a good one.